Hello everyone, and we're back again for what's a really interesting one. And I think this connection, Roopa, you are amazing.
Hello, I'm here.
You're here. Thank you very much. This is the
Lovely to
fastest
see you.
connection I've ever had.
Well, let's hope it stays that way.
I hope so. I'm sure it will. I'm just turning my volume up. Sorry, because it's a bit quiet. But welcome, Roopa, and thank you very much for joining us
Thank
on
you. It's a pleasure.
Kitchen Conversations. For those of you who don't know Roopa, let me introduce her. So she's a chef, an author, a broadcaster. She's written an amazing book that just came out about a month ago, something like that, called India, the World Vegetarian, and it looks absolutely delicious, I have to say, Roopa. And I think it's the beginning of a series because you and your knowledge in Indian cuisine is immense.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, it was really great fun putting the recipes together because in a way it was collating my past, my five, over almost 6 decades now, but growing up in Cumbria to parents who were Punjabi, then moving to London and seeing a different side of Indian cooking, going to India and working as a chef, and then bringing the whole caboodle back to Britain in 2001. So it's lovely to see memories in culinary form.
No, that's brilliant. So let's just go through your life. So you grew up in Cumbria with your parents.
Yes,
Then you
yes,
came
that's
to
right.
London and you went to the Cordon Bleu school, is that correct?
That's right. That's right. When I was 18, went to London, and it was quite a shock because, quite honestly, you live in a small village and you think you can make a great Victoria sponge, and when I was young, I sort of thought that, well, Indian food is for mums. It's kind of, that's what mums do. Mums make biryani, mums make chapatis, and I was more interested in making sort of souffles and hollandaise sauce. So I did the year diploma, and I think what it gave me was a solid grounding, because when it comes to Indian recipes, very little is written down. And if you need to refer to a book, especially as I worked as a chef later on, they would kind of look down on you in a way, going, you need a book. It's all in our head. And my mother would measure recipes with her hands, and she had the most elegant hands. So she would feed a family of 5, and my hands, which are quite like ploughman's hands, they'd be feeding 100. So, and she'd say things like, well, cook until done. And I'd say, well,
Help. And
so
there was that thing that chefs did, just sort of said, well, you just keep adding until it looks right.
yes,
And
exactly.
it's sort of like, we know or you don't know. You're a good chef or you're not a chef.
Exactly. And there is something to be said by watching mum cook. And I always tell people that we knew what kind of mood she was in, because she'd always have an afternoon siesta, always. And then 4 o'clock in the evening, she'd wake up and we'd come back from school, and she'd tuck her sari into her waist, the bit that went over the shoulder, and then start kneading the chapati atta. So the more force she used, the more we were a bit wary. And she'd put a little plate over the dough to let it rest, and then she'd make our meal. And every evening we had a full-on Punjabi meal, and if she was cross, she would burn that cumin. And we knew. And if she was in a good mood, we'd get these lovely wafts of garam masala emanating from the simmering pots of dal and chanas and all the rest of it. So it's a good gauge, Indian food, for your mood. And I think there's something to be said by, when you cook in a good mood, everything comes out right. And if you're cooking for people you love, that also is a magic ingredient, which quite often is not considered. And I think home cooking really does have that special feeling about it. And these recipes, many of them are inspired by those recipes, mum used to make.
I love that way. That's rather beautifully put. The way that if you're in a good mood and you cook for those you love, you're going to cook better.
Definitely.
I think that's lovely.
Always. I have cremated quite a few dishes in my time. Let's just leave it.
Can I just ask, for those of us who don't know, tell us where the Punjabi region is, where the flavours.
Yes, because, quite often reduce Indian cooking to a commodity. And
Mm.
I think that's changed a lot in the last 2 decades. But actually, India is made up of many different regions. And my parents are from Punjab, and that's in the north of India. And it's known as the granary of India because that's where we have all the breads, the pratas, and that. So we're less of a rice-eating community. Although that's not to say we don't like a good a good biryani or kidney bean rajma curry with rice, but we're roti eating. And Dad actually lived in Calcutta for a long time, and that's got Bengali spicing, which is totally different from the garlic, onion, ginger, kind of earthy, warming spices and masalas of Punjabi cooking. Bengali cooking, on the other hand, has an astringency. The dishes are often cooked in mustard oil, which is smoked first, so it loses some of its pungency. It's different spices. It's a whole new cuisine, and the same goes for South India. Dan, my husband, is originally from South India, even though they've been in South Africa for 4 generations. But their food is still 4 generations later: curry leaves, mustard seeds, and lots of rice.
Ah, okay. So when you went back to India, you worked in some very big, well-known 5-star
Yes.
hotels, which was quite an acclaim as a woman to get there. That can't
Well,
have been easy.
I was one of, I think I was one of hundreds of men at the time at the Taj Mansingh. There were a couple of others, but I was the only one on the shop floor, as you say. But I think the most momentous thing about working at the Taj was my very first meeting with the general manager, Ronnie Lobo, who sadly has just died 2 years ago. But he looked at my CV and he said, "Oh, this is very interesting. You're going to have to cook for our chefs." And, you know, it was the 90s, and I did a galette, and I did a couple of other things, and they came and tasted it. But then he saw on the bottom of my CV interests, and I'd written classical guitar because I used to play and teach. And he just said, "You play the guitar. I'm from Goa. You've got to work with us."
So your guitar skills got you the job.
It was my guitar skills. It wasn't, which I no longer have, sadly, but that's what got me the job. And I was there for 5 years, and they became family to me. I'm still in touch with the chefs, many of whom have now moved all over the world. But we share a bond, we share a camaraderie, which I think is lovely. It stood the test of time, almost, 15 years now, if not more.
That's beautiful. And tell me this, you also had a TV show in India, didn't
I
you?
did. Well, it was a segment in a TV show, and I was possibly the only Indian chef with a Cumbrian accent, which could go quite wildly to the Indian. And I remember being fascinated. It was with a company called NDTV, and they made a program for Star Television, which was broadcast across India and beyond, actually, into Asia. But what I loved was I'd find these new masalas. There was a lovely one for an orange palau with lamb. And I'd never come across this. And we went to Lucknow, and I discovered Awadh cooking, which is a very different style of quite complex masalas, very sort of warming spices. And I'd get letters, because in those days, emails hadn't really taken off. And there was one wonderful lady who said, "Look, biryanis are boring. What we want is bread and butter pudding." And the class, because if you think about it, if you live in India and you're having fragrant biryanis and dals and masalas and
They're just
every
normal.
day, that's just the run of the mill stuff. So what they wanted was actually more exciting food like bread and butter pudding. And
So that's what you were cooking on the TV show. You were cooking Western.
I was cooking a lot of Western, and then on festival days we'd do Indian. And I think one of my happiest, we travel a little bit as well, and going to Lucknow and meeting former Maharajas, because they lost their purse in the 70s, but their retainers are still with them. So, many of them are now very, very old, and they're very secretive with their recipes, because they will pass the recipes on to their son, and that's how it's worked for generations. But now a lot of the young ones don't want to be in the kitchen. They want to work in IT or, you know, and so what's going to happen when these recipes go? And I just would love to document them and to, you know,
Yeah.
some of the best techniques, the smoking technique in my book, I got from stalking this old man.
Well, I want to ask you about that because I saw
Yeah.
that you pour ghee
Yes.
over hot coals that are in a tin foil basket within your curry to sort of
Yes.
infuse a smoky
Yes.
flavour.
Yes. Well, in India, we use betel nut leaves. And what you can do, instead of just the smoky flavor, you can put cardamom. So you can get cardamom smoke or black pepper smoke. Or, I mean, it's just, but how I got that, oh, this was while I was at the Taj. And the chef was there, old man, very grumpy. He was not fond of me, I'll be honest. I did try. So I ended up stalking him and hiding behind pillars because he used to cook for the chef's table every day. And I've never tasted food like that. And then one day he just said, look, come over here. He was very polite, but I knew there was menace behind those words. And he said, I'm going to show you two fabulous dishes. And then you just get out of my hair and be happy with those two. But do you know, those two dishes changed my life. One was the smoking, and the other was how he makes, he called it it was sort of a palau, which I've adapted to become into a biryani, slight differences. And the other was a korma, and it was complex, but it just changed my whole thinking because he had such a light hand. And I think when people say to me quite often, oh, you're Indian, you like chili heat. Well, that's a bit of a myth, really, because it's about the warmth of spices, the palate. And it's a bit like wine and food matching, which I know very little about. But with spices, it's a bit like saying, oh, fennel seeds, they're kind of sweet. Maybe they would go with ground ginger, which is astringent. And maybe that would go with mushrooms. So it's about trial and error. So there's no hard and fast rules. But it's just making those spices work for you and not being frightened of them.
I can see a salt, heat, acid, but Rupa's
Yes.
spices book coming out with you telling us what's sweet, what's hot, what's astringent, what's warming. Because
well, bring it on. And what's so fascinating is that if you take something like cinnamon, which I would normally associate with sweet dishes, well, the cassia bark, which is similar, not from the same tree, is thicker. Cinnamon comes in quills, so it's nice, tight rolled. It's a bit like chocolate carac when you roll it. But cassia is thicker. It's got a more pungent flavor. The two are interchangeable, although sweet cinnamon will do more of a warming, Christmassy feel. But if you drop that cinnamon or the cassia into hot oil, it becomes strident and bold and even angry if you put it into too hot oil. And that's what you want when you're making a really sort of punchy meat curry. So some sweet spices can also become quite strident. It's just knowing what temperature to drop them into the oil. That's what makes the difference.
Tell me about cardamons. I absolutely adore cardamons. I love cardamom seeds. I love the smell. I love everything. But sometimes I can't be bothered to take the little seeds outside of the green bit. So I just smash them and put them in whole. And then people are biting and they feel like they've put my nail in there.
It's the same. Well, my mum used to do that with kheer, which is rice pudding, and I'll never forget as children, where she'd just fling in the pod and she'd split it, and then it's a bit like being at the dentist with cloves. You know how it suddenly goes to your brain.
Yes.
I mean, you're very right. But then on the other hand, my eldest daughter, when she was revising for her exams, oh my goodness, she would actually chew on green cardamom pods, which is an acquired taste. But
I could do that. I love it. Oh, someone's going, ah.
It's one of those love-hate things. It's a bit like coriander. You either love it. There's no sitting on the fence with coriander. I know a lot of people who can't stand it. And it
tastes soapy to them. They've got something within their whole body system that makes it taste different, haven't they? It's been proven now.
It's a genetic quirk, which is
that's it.
which is what they all say to me. My son-in-law doesn't like coriander, and you know, and so okay, that's fine. And cardamom is another one. But what I do with the empty cardamom pods is a bit like when you make vanilla sugar and you put the pods in the sugar. I do the same with cardamom pods. And if you get a jam jar of sugar and just shove in your empty cardamom pods, they still have flavor. And
Oh, I
so that's
like
kind of
that.
a gentle way of introducing sweet spice into your meals for timid people. And then you can build it up from there.
No, that sounds amazing, because after working all around India, you returned to England with your two daughters.
Yes, in 2001, my first husband died when I was very young, and then I worked in the hotel and with the TV company for a long time, and
Yes, you
essentially
worked with UK TV as their food
that
editor,
was,
didn't you?
well, that was when I came back to England. But essentially in 2001, I came back with well, 3 suitcases and two teenage daughters, and I remember one of them saying to me, "Mama, you know, it was a very wet summer." She said, "I can sum up London with one word." And I said, "Oh, Malvika, what is it?" And she said, "Grey." And it was grey coats, grey sky, grey pavement, you know. And even Pallavi, bless her, my other daughter, you know, it's a steep learning curve, because even though we came on holidays, it's very different when you sort of spend a day in London and then go up north to Cumbria. And when you're here and you have to navigate so much, everything from cultural differences to food. It, it wasn't easy, but you know, failure wasn't an option. And my UK TV family were absolutely brilliant, because I joined them and we worked together on so many fabulous programs with, you know, the late Gary Rhodes and
All the great chefs.
all the great chefs, and Market Kitchen was an absolute joy, because we quite often got chefs who hadn't yet had experience, who are now big stars, you know, and doing great things. Lovely to see Matt Tebbett last night get an award at the Fortnum Awards last night, which was just wonderful. And also that's how I sort of cut my teeth on working with photographers and understanding how they think, and realizing that, you know, behind every great chef in a book is a fabulous editor, a fabulous food stylist, a great home ec, you know, and these are our unsung heroes who really, really do work hard. I mean, you know, because quite often amazing chefs are wonderful with a pan in the hand and they're creative, they give us the ideas, but to take that idea and to make it stand strong on paper, you know, it takes a good editor, a good food writer.
Yeah, it does. It does. But this isn't your only book. You've written other books, haven't you?
I've done Curry Lovers, which was with Ryland Peters and Small when I was at UK TV, and that was great fun. That's got more meat in. But this one is, I think it's this latest one is regional Indian vegetarian food, and I think what's so lovely is that it's not a sort of it's not a PR statement. It's not a PC thing to do. In India, people have been vegetarian for centuries. It's just what you do. And when I used to have dinners, you know, I never used to sort of ask, "Are you vegetarian?" Because you always cater for vegetarians. It's just what you do. And so if I was making a Western dish and you'd have your hero, I don't know, a casserole or something, and if there was a vegetarian there, and I did learn quickly, they'd be having a plate of green beans, and that was just awful. But with Indian food, you've got the dal, you've got two vegetables, you've got a yogurt dish, you've usually got some form of rice, you've got a meat or chicken dish, so there's plenty to choose from. And it's a cuisine that encourages sharing. And the sheer fact that you're eating with your fingers makes everything so much more relaxed.
Oh my goodness. Do you still eat with your fingers now?
Always. Even when I'm in a restaurant. I make a point. It doesn't matter if it's a Michelin-starred restaurant and there's 4 forks and 15 knives. I will eat with my hands, because I think there's something about the connection between the hand and the food and the way it's eaten. And of course, there's a whole load of etiquette around which hand you use for your water glass, which hand you use for your chapati or your roti. But, and this is something I learned from Mum, because in the 70s, you know, we had two types of dinner parties. One of them was the, you know, prawn cocktail, coq au vin, black forest gatto, pears in red wine, and, you know, the percolator would be on the go. And I loved those. But for the Indian ones, it was proper Indian. She didn't dilute it. And she did put cutlery for those who were a bit nervous, but it was an Indian meal and it was served the way she would have served us. And I really
wish I was at that table.
It was a real revelation, because for my 16th, 17th birthday, I had friends over, and there was one friend who I'm still in touch with, and she'd never had garlic before. And even then I was, well, this was in the 70s.
That's unbelievable.
Oh, well, it's a rural area. And even there were two shops in Carlisle where you could buy aubergines. One was under the town hall and it was very narrow. And as a special treat, Dad would, well, you know, one small aubergine, as the joke goes, but we'd also get dates in a long packet. Do you remember, with the spear?
Yes.
And that was exotic. That was exotic.
Gosh. Yeah, times have changed, and we're very lucky. We live in London and we have an amazing plethora of shops.
We do, but even in Cumbria, you know, there's a lot more available now. People are more aware, and also there's online stockists. So it doesn't matter whether you're in the Hebrides or whether you're in Plymouth or in London, you can actually have a taste of how food is made, you know, in India. There's no reason why you can't recreate that and add your own Cumbrian twist. Why not? What's wrong with that?
I agree with that. And also, England's become, or the UK has become, such a multicultural environment. So we're enjoying learning about all these other foods, whether it be India or China or Mexico. And it's rather endearing for us, and we're very lucky, because our food in the 70s was quite poor.
Well, I remember going to the co-op and you could buy olive oil in a little bottle, and it was kept, I hate to say this, but it was kept in where the medicines are. It wasn't used.
I was just about to say, it came from a pharmacy back then, and you used to have a spoonful of olive oil a day to keep you well. Yes. And now we're splashing it on all we eat, and it's delicious.
And it was rubbed into skin as well. I remember that, thinking, oh, this is interesting. But times really have changed. And I think during lockdown, it's quite interesting to see how, you know, when in March, when it first started, we all turned to comfort food. And I did too. It was shepherd's pie. It was still cold. Shepherd's pie and sausage and mash and things like that. But now we're into week 8 of it. We're sort of a bit bored, and we want something that has a little bit more flavor, that doesn't have us pounding masala, you know, for for hours. And I think a little bit of cumin, a little bit of chili, it can go either way. It doesn't have to be Indian, it can be Middle Eastern, and also it doesn't have to be any cuisine. It can be a mashup of whatever you feel like. It's about appeasing your own palate.
And also, people are not going out to restaurants. They're making, with all these great delivery companies, a mini restaurant in their home and challenging themselves with the ingredients and with their recipes, which is great. Can I just ask you about, so Gary Lineker cooked your South mango curry and went, I've just received this book. How did he get your book? How did you taste Gary?
Well, I think it's something to do. India Night tweeted, she posted a really positive message, which was so kind of her. And then she has a Pakistani mum, and so obviously she cooks a lot of South Asian food herself. And she said something very positive. So I'm assuming that she must be friends with him.
Oh my goodness.
Because I just saw and I thought, oh, it can't be his real account, surely. It must be a spoof, it must be, you know. But honestly, he got the book and he posted the message, and that was lovely. And then 3 hours later, there's this mango curry, and he already had curry leaves in his fridge. I mean, that is, but you see, he played for Leicester. So
Ah, that's the
you
point.
must have a connection with that
Yeah.
kind of cooking. But it's not just that, because when I clicked on his story, he should have his own show, honestly. He was making a veal chop. It was magnificent. And there was sage butter and new seasoned Jersey Royals. And if that didn't tempt anybody into the kitchen, I don't know what would. Hopefully my mango curry might have helped afterwards.
Well,
But
obviously he's a keen chef, but he
he
enjoyed that.
knows he knows his stuff, and it absolutely made my day. And
Mm.
before I noticed, I was wondering why I had so many Arsenal and Arsenal fans.
That's so funny.
I thought, oh, this is a bit odd.
Oh, I love the sound of your paneer and apricot koftas.
Oh, yes. Now they
And
are
yours,
they are
yeah.
lovely, and I do think you know, if you make your own paneer,
I was just going
that
to ask you, do you make it?
I do. The reason I do is because it doesn't go rubbery at all. It's totally different from the shop bought variety. Now, if you do buy the shop bought variety, nothing wrong in that, but soak it in hot water before you use it and it makes it soft. But making your own is, you're tapping into a history, a heritage that's been repeated for hundreds and hundreds of years. And you may be doing it in your suburban kitchen, but you're helping keep a tradition alive. And it's a bit like making ricotta. The
Yeah,
trick
tell
is
us,
to
how
use
do you do it?
slightly stale. I know this sounds coming to the end of its best of life milk, full cream. And sometimes what I do if it's a bit fresh is I'll just leave it outside for a bit, and that gets the acid going, the lactic acid, and that's what you
Okay.
want. Bring it to a simmer slowly, about half an hour. Give it a stir so it doesn't catch, and then add some salt to season. And then the acid I add is either lime or lemon juice. They both work. I think vinegar gives it a bit of a bit too much acid.
Yeah.
And just stir it until the curds form. And then strain it through a J cloth, a clean J cloth in a sieve, and you'll get this cheese. Now you can use this cheese fresh. You can crumble it. You can use it after about half an hour when it firms up. But what I like to do is fold the J cloth over it and put a couple of tins of beans, and goodness knows we've got enough of those in the house at the moment, on top. Put it in the fridge for a couple of hours, and you can cut it into cubes. And then just drop it into your curry, whatever you're making, or koftas. And if the
Oh,
firmer it is, especially for koftas, you want kind of firm paneer, so you can kind of crumble or grate it. So it's that simple.
and literally the firmness comes through waiting it and letting it sort of
Grating it.
dehydrate
Yes,
for
yes,
a couple of hours
yes.
longer or
And
overnight.
and you'll get better paneer by using sour milk or milk on the turn, and you'll need less lemon juice for that, because if you try making it with fresh milk, you need lots of lemon juice, and I find you seem to lose a lot of the whey in the sieve. So just, you know, sometimes I'll just get a liter of milk and just leave it out for a bit,
Yeah.
and bring it to a simmer.
I
And
love the sound of this. Can I ask you, can you put spices in it or can you put
you
herbs in
can.
it before you set it?
Well,
Yeah, you can.
you can, because when we actually used to buy our paneer, there was a paneer man, and he would sell cream, and he would sell in India, and he would sell paneer, and he'd look at me and he'd say, masala or plain? And I'd say, sometimes, usually plain, but the masala one is lovely because that you can add coriander, green chilies, toasted ground cumin, and it used to sometimes be served as a snack with drinks. So you'd cut it up and then squeeze more lime juice over the top and a little bit of chili powder, and you pass it around with your gin and tonics or whiskey. India is a whiskey drinking country, or beer. And that would be an acceptable, even the welcome snack. And it's healthy.
This sounds delicious, and someone's just put up great use for milk that's just about to go off.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
But
waste not,
bear in
want not.
mind, if you've got, 1 litre will probably give you about 240, 50 grams, depending on how sour the milk is or going off. So you do need quite a bit of milk. Otherwise,
Okay.
you'll end up with a tablespoon.
What do you do with the whey's? Can you do anything with that, or
Well,
they just?
you can drink it, and you can make a drink with it, with more spices. I must admit I don't, but you can, you can, and people do.
One thing we've not spoken about is that you did all the research for Rick Stein's India TV series on BBC too.
Well, it was not all the research. I mean, there was a team, and Denhams were
Yeah.
lovely. They were very supportive. But it was just so wonderful to be, the late David Pritchard sort of just gave me a blank canvas and said, Rick wants to go to India. And it was like, well, where? And he goes, well, you just have to work it out. And I was given, you know, the constraints and all the rest of it. And again, I met the most fabulous people. The one that sticks out in my mind is a lady called Mrs. Butel, who owns a green tea plantation in the Himalayan foothills. And she had a room filled with the most wonderful pickles, all homemade. There must have been about 3 dozen. Everything from mango to lime to fiddle fern, you know, aubergine green. And she was just so, she was like, well, this is what I do. I just make pickles. She did a lot more as well. And
did she sell her pickles, or they were just for her friends and family?
It was for friends and family. And there was almost like a vintage. Oh, this one's 5 years old, and this lime, this black lime, is 10 years old, and you know that you pay homage to those pickles. It's such a wonderful skill to have. But she was just one of many who we met, and
so you went on tour with him, and you travelled with him and helped.
I did the recce
Okay.
with a colleague, and we did North India, and another team went down south. But for me, it was almost like coming full circle, because I was able to say, oh, the chef I worked with, his auntie makes fantastic samosas. Oh, in Calcutta, here's da 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 da. In Lucknow, let's go and meet this guy who I used to know 10, 20 years ago. So it was lovely.
And did Rick visit Mrs. Pickle? Did he go and do something there?
I think they did, because when you make a TV show, you've got to film a lot more than you actually need. So he went to lots of places. He went to the bazaars in Lucknow, to the Maharajas, former Maharajas, you know, and traveled. And you know, he's so, I think what's so interesting about people like Rick is, it's not just what's on the plate. It's the culture, it's the history, it's the connection to the communities. And he does bring all that together naturally, because he has a natural curiosity. Like so many, you know, fantastic people.
Yeah,
that's what works.
But he's very good at getting it across. He's very warm.
Yes.
He's a charming man, and he is inquisitive, but delivers. He's very good.
And he really knows his stuff.
Yeah, he does. And just tell us, I know that you're very fond of the, I don't know if it's a spice actually, I don't know what you call it, tamarind.
That's this morning. Honestly, it is my favourite ingredient, I have to say. And there's been some confusion almost about what kind of tamarind to buy. And a lot of people have concentrate on their shelves. And I just think it's got a bit of a metallic flavour, and it's worth just playing around a little bit. And I tend to use wet tamarind, seedless. And what tamarind does, it gives it a tangy kick. It's quite sour. You can get sweet varieties in pods. And my mum used to climb trees when she was young in Delhi and suck the sweet fruit from the tamarind tree. But the variety we use in most Indian cooking is the sour one. And I will add it to a tomato chutney or a sauce. And it just gives it that sourness, that tang which you need to cap, or a chutney itself with samosas. No, I have to say tamarind is my favourite. If I had to choose one ingredient.
I've got like a block that I have, and it's got the seeds in and everything, but you have to sort of like cut it off and then soften it and then pick them out.
Well, all I do is break off the block, put it in a pan, cover it with water generously because it's easier to sieve, and then give it a good boil, and it softens. And then, I mean, for me, the best way is to get your hands in and give it a
Yeah.
good mash up. And if you want a smooth finish, push it through a colander, because honestly, you'll be there all day if you're trying to push it through a normal sieve that you use for flour, because the fibers tend to sort of make it stick. So just bung it through a colander, or like you said, pick out the seeds, but there's still fibers quite often that get left behind. And then, you know, I'll add sugar to that, jaggery, palm sugar, muscovado, it doesn't really matter. And sometimes I'll cook it with dates, and that's what makes that lovely dipping sauce when it's seasoned with cumin and ginger. So it's one little thing that can do so much for you. And sometimes if I'm cooking meat, I'll just use it to glaze the joint, maybe 3/4 of the way through cooking, so it becomes sticky and lovely. So
No, I love curry. And ghee, do you make your own ghee ever,
I
or do you
do.
buy it?
No, I do, honestly. I mean, I think the only bought ghee that I've used and given the thumbs up to is from Borough Market Hook and Son, because they make it the right way. And it's so easy to make at home. It's cheaper too. And all you do is, it's just clarified butter. Put a slab of butter in a pan, cook it over a gentle heat until the milk solids begin to catch and brown on the bottom of the pan. And then it takes about 20 minutes, and then pour it through a sieve which has been lined with kitchen paper, double layer. And what happens is the milk solids stay in the kitchen paper, and the milk solids are what burns, right, when you're heating fat to fry something in. But you've got all that lovely buttery flavour. And there's no better fat for making pratas, because they glisten. They really do, and they've got so much lovely flavour.
Oh, that's a... And where do you source your spices from?
Well, that's a good question. There are lots of online stockists. There's one in York called Raffy's. There's Spice Mountain in Borough Market, the Seasoned Pioneers. So there's no shortage. But, you know, for me, I quite like the social interaction of going to my local Indian shop and having a little chat with him. And, you know, he gives me some cooking tips. I sort of get quite cross because the coriander's not fresh enough. And... you know, during lockdown, it's like a cocktail party without the drinks. It's the only social interaction I get once a week.
But isn't it important? Isn't it important for your spices to be very, very fresh, because then they'll be more fragrant?
No, because I don't buy ground spices. I buy whole spices. Whole spices keep forever. I mean, they'll keep for 8 months, 9 months. Cumin and cinnamon and cardamom. When you grind them, they lose their volatile oils very quickly. We're talking within days. So for me, I prefer to buy whole spices. And then I make a tiny amount of garam masala and keep it in a little jam jar. And when it comes close to finishing, then I'll just make another. And I know, you know, purists would balk at this, and you're supposed to do it in a mortar and pestle. Life's too short.
This was my next question. Go on.
I don't mind doing some things in a mortar and pestle. I'm happy to grind cumin in a mortar and pestle, fennel seeds, black peppercorns, fine. Garam masala. You try slamming a cinnamon stick with with a pestle, and it goes everywhere. So I'm afraid I have to own up. I have a coffee grinder which is no longer used for coffee beans, and I put everything in there, you know, black cardamom seeds and cinnamon and nutmeg and peppercorns and cumin, and give it a good whiz, sieve it, and put all the bits in the sieve back into the coffee machine. And that will keep for a couple of weeks. But what I can do, and I often do, is seal them in plastic bags and put them in the freezer. Just have a bag full of ground spices, because it just keeps the freshness in. Yeah. And that way we haven't got these sad spices which are long past their sell-by date. And once you've used your 1 teaspoon of cumin, you know, what you're going to do with the other 50 grams. So, yeah. But I do advocate experimenting, because put some spice on your roast potatoes. You'd be surprised.
And you're saying to people, buy whole spices. And
I tend to buy whole. So, you know, when you grate nutmeg on you don't even need a microplane, you can use a knife. There is so much freshness compared to nutmeg that's been sitting in a plastic tub for a couple of months, if not longer. And when you smell, you compare the two, there's just no comparison, because one is very, very musty and one is fresh. Whole nutmeg keeps for over a year. And I must admit, I do have some sort of rare spices or spices that I don't often use, but you know, they go in the freezer if I'm not using a lot of them. They don't take up that much space.
Very good tip, actually, putting them in the freezer, because it just sort of stabilizes them and puts them to sleep almost.
Yes, and then they wake up again when they're out. So you do lose some of the fragrance. You can never have everything just as you want it. But we cook in a hurry, you know, so try. I would recommend buying whole cumin seeds, maybe, you know, not from supermarkets, but from proper South Asian stores, because the cumin seed you buy from a South Asian store or from a specialist spice shop hasn't already been browned. So it hasn't begun to lose its volatile oils or its fragrance. It's raw in the true state.
And
so
I'd also say
tip.
they're so much cheaper.
So much cheaper. No comparison.
Yeah,
You're
there's no
talking under
comparison.
£1 sometimes.
Yeah. And you know, if there's just you at home, then I'd say buy it and split it with a friend.
Yes,
and then you'll
that's
get through
even
them.
better. Good food is always meant to be shared.
Yes, it is. And listen, I've just got to say, because you're a busy, restaurant reviews, when you're not doing all this other work, you go around and you review restaurants for Time Out. You also give demos at our beloved Borough Market.
I love
and you do a lot of broadcasting, and you also do sort of Tilda Rice, you do ideas for them, and you've worked with BBH on pitching, haven't you?
Well, I sort of do a little bit of everything. It's almost like a jack of all trades. I mean, I reviewed restaurants for Time Out for about almost 18 years. So, and that stopped about 2 years ago, but I've still got this love of visiting new places and testing and tasting and experimenting. And I think I just pray that the restaurant industry isn't decimated by what's happening at the moment, because there are some really talented, committed chefs. And it's not just back of house, it's front of house too. It's the suppliers, it's people who depend on our business. So when businesses do open up, I really hope we will go back and enjoy great meals with great friends again.
Yes, I think we will.
To lose.
And you know, one thing that people has proved very, very positive is we all shop at supermarkets, but people have learnt who the suppliers are to the restaurants. And because they can't go to the restaurants, they've been getting in this lovely food a couple of nights a week to bring the restaurant table to their kitchen. And okay, they have to cook it, or some places are even doing ready sort of meals. And so it's a real treat for people to learn about provenance food.
I think so. And it's not just at home. I mean, you know, my in hospitals too. A lot of the restaurants are setting up tables and they're introducing people who wouldn't normally eat fabulous sushi or wonderful dishes. So, I mean, I think that's a great thing. And also with my younger daughter, Pallavi, you know, she's very busy, doesn't often get time to cook. But over the last few months, you know, she's been baking. She's been inspired by chefs and their videos online. And she's been, you know, it's just encouraging people to get a little bit out of their comfort zone. And she's made some amazing things.
Can I just ask you, did your two daughters stay in this grey country?
Well, they've grown to love it. I think the first month was a bit touch and go. But
they're here.
They're here. They love it. We're part of the fabric of Britain, and I'm glad for it. We're all in the same country, the same city, in fact.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Roopa, it's been an absolute treat talking to you.
Well, I've loved
and you are a mine of information on spices. And I would say to anyone, you must get Roopa's The World Vegetarian, India, The World Vegetarian, because it's a delicious looking book. and with the photography done by Lord Loftus, no less.
Yes.
David Loftus, that is, but he likes to be called that.
Yeah.
Can I just ask you, what is your favourite foodie film, book, hero?
Ooh, film. Now,
Or TV
interestingly,
show or
well,
book?
film, there is this lovely film called The Lunchbox. And I think you can see it online. And it's just so simple and so gentle. It's about a woman who makes a tiffin box for her husband in India. And you get tiffin carriers who pick up these boxes every day. And it gets mixed up. And it ends up at a widow's office desk.
Yeah.
And he just loves the food. And the film is a sort of I won't spoil it, but it's an unfolding romance over the love of great food. And her husband doesn't really appreciate what she does, but she sort of makes these beautifully seasoned and spiced dishes. And this widow in an office somewhere suddenly, because there's a mix up with the boxes, gets to eat these soft chapatis and beautiful vegetables, and so it unfolds. So I think that is my favorite.
Oh, that's brilliant. You're the second person to recommend that, actually.
Really, it's a
Yeah.
wonderful film, and it was recommended by Madhu, a friend of mine, and she just said to me, and I don't watch a lot of films, and she goes, "No, Rupert, you will really, really love this." So I did, and she was right.
Oh, well, that's fantastic. Again, thank you very, very much. Thanks for teaching us how to make paneer and making our own ghee and all those spice tips that you've given us. And you've been brilliant, Roopa. Thank you. And I just want to say tomorrow we're taking a holiday. It's going to be my first holiday since I started this. I'm having a day off because at 11 o'clock on Sunday morning, we are connecting with the god of my kitchen's life when I first came to London, Alistair Little. We're joining him in Australia for a tour, which will
Serious.
be
I'll tune in.
sensational. And he's amazing. So thank you very much, Alistair. I hope the technology works. We're a little bit worried about that, but we'll make it work for you. So that's 11 o'clock on Sunday morning. There'll be no show tomorrow night.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you
All
very
the
much,
best.
Rupert. You've been a star, and thanks for
I've
sharing
loved it.
your India and your book with us.
Thank you very much.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye.
Bye.